Hello and welcome to OT the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. My name is Felix Schultz.
And I'm Andy Green, of course.
How's life, Andy? What's happening?
Life's all right. How about you?
Yeah, good. Did you stay up for the meteor? I guess we didn't know about the meteor the other night. It was a surprise, wasn't it?
It's already become a dial, JLC or a Rolex. Wasn't it Space Junk, I should say.
Apparently it was space junk.
Russian space junk.
Do we know it was Russian space junk?
I don't know.
Maybe it was Tesla's car coming back down.
Could be, but it was incinerated before it hit the Earth, which is...
Just like Twitter's stock price. Oy.
Woof. Felix, this week we are talking to a guy, one of the first kind of international watch people I met, and one of the first kind of early brands, we've talked about a few times, but one of the first early brands that really caught my attention.
Yep.
We have on Jorn Werdelin from Linde Werdelin.
Nice. This is another solo effort. This was an Andy Green special.
You had a migraine?
I was going to say either gallivanting or being ill, but I think it was ill this time.
It's one of the two with you.
Yeah.
You're either having too much fun or you're having no fun at all.
Yes, but Linde Werdelin's an interesting brand. Obviously, I haven't listened to the interview, but like real sort of early online watch peak sort of 2.0, like early Hodinkee, early, all those young guys disrupting the watch media space era.
Yeah, well, they were the first brand to do like a certified sort of pre-owned online program. Yeah, so they launched that. They were apparently the first brand, and they're pretty into their eco sustainability. Very low production. I think it's a couple hundred watches a year. So they've kept it.
You got a business.
They've kept it small. But it's really interesting because the watches that were sort of, I remember vividly, one of the first watches I wrote under your mentorship, I should say. Yeah, well, it was about Dane, who's the Watch Vault, who's a dealer now, but he was a big Linde Werdelin collector back in the day, still has a few pieces. And I remember chatting to him about the different prices of things. And there's one called the Spido Speed. It was a precious metal kind of titanium mix contraption. And the prices are pretty crazy because they've made so few, and they've done, everything's quite limited, but a few really solid limited editions. The stuff with like the tattoo engravings as well, if you remember the tattoo.
Yeah, like the octopus and the...
Yeah, really early Johnny Dow, King Nerd collaborations. Yep. Sort of the first collaboration he actually did outside of, I think, his Purdy stuff and very early Bamford days.
His employer, so... Yeah,
so his kind of foray into watches as well. It's quite interesting, and we talk about it because... Jean's got obviously the co-founder, but he's got a cool kind of backstory with it all. And yeah, I like him. I like the watches too. I still like them.
Again, this is coming back to, we were talking about it last week, nostalgia buys.
No, you're right. You're 100% right.
Yeah. You buy what you like. And what you like is informed by your taste in 2011.
Yes. Yeah. We're at that point. Speaking of things that were cool in 2011.
That is really well done, Andy. I'm jealous of that.
Thank you. Talking watches with Adam Levine and Ben Clymer of Hodinkee. Adam's Maroon 5 front man. They sat down. And look, Maroon 5 still cool now, whatever. They're a very massive band. Really exploded, I think, more like 2008, 9, 10. That was like really the kind of explosion for them, but he did Talking Watches.
Also famous these days for his rather famous infidelity, which wasn't, surprisingly, not brought up in Talking Watches.
Loyal to the watch game, though. He's got a pretty solid collection, mostly Patek and Rolex from what I gathered, scrolling through the video.
I watched the whole thing. I spent 17 minutes watching it, so, I'd have something.
I didn't have to.
One Patek. He's got one Patek.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got some interesting look. We're sort of talking a bit about this. We talk about it fairly often. I also watched his Architectural Digest's home tour a while ago, pre-infidelity scandal.
Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to the...
Well, it's interesting. It's fascinating. I think it does matter. Like, it's fascinating to see how these people sort of, how you construct your identity and how the face you put out to the world. And it is relevant. I'm going to bring this around, Andy.
It's work. All right.
No, how the face you sort of present to the world is one thing, because his house is very nice. Like, it's not the house that it was filmed at, Talking Watches, but there's like legit nice contemporary art in there and like generic sort of, modern furniture. Not quite as like basic as Eames and Banksy, Like
Hmm.
clearly the same sort of vibe and the same sort of like generic rich guy taste, but he does it pretty well. And the watch collection's the same.
Well, they showed the car collection as well on the in the article, and he's got
Yep,
a resto mod, sort of Ford Bronco and Porsche, and
it's cool.
it's it's cool, and it's like it's hard being cool. It's hard being kind of unique and cool, and I don't know. Like I don't know that I hate the generic rich guy taste as long as you're sort of owning it
And he
for.
does it like, and I went into Talking Watches expecting to hate it,
Mm,
because I don't particularly like Adam Levine. I don't particularly like Maroon 5. I don't,
mhm.
nothing there really appeals to me. But I don't particularly like Rolex, in that way. But so he's got, for the people playing at home, he's got like a rainbow. He's got a couple of Paul Newmans. He's got interesting Atelier de Genève
Yes,
that he
one
did,
of one he
that he
designed. Yeah,
customized with them. He's got a day date and a GMT. But they're all like, it's a pretty sort of boring rich guy celebrity collection, but it's all quite nice. Like it's all worn. Like
mm,
one was a gift from his wife. The day date he bought it because his manager who passed away wore it and he associates with that. So there's a connection there, and it's actually worn stuff, and it's clear that he's not. There's some thought in it, and it's not like he's going to a dealer and saying, "Hey,"
yep.
or going to John Mayer, who's he's mates with apparently, and saying, "Hey, what should I buy?" and being
10
told.
watch collection. Yeah,
Like, there's a
that
little bit of active thought in there, and it's actually worn stuff, which is nice.
you got to respect the thoughtfulness, regardless of I think of the purchase. Like he's cared enough about it, and I don't know. Like there are people that if they were in his position, they'd go out and buy just wacky shit and whatever,
Yep.
follow their heart. But I think the majority of people would go out and buy, you know, Daytonas and steal Patek and steal Rolex and keep it within that kind of safe and conservative realm. And then their
Yeah.
wacky stuff would be the Rainbow Daytona. Like that would be wacky to him, or the unique piece,
Yeah, it
which
is. Yeah, yeah. Or
you know,
the
it's like
Atelier
his
de Genève, yeah.
yeah, the unique Daytona he did with them, and that's like the wacky thing. I think it's
But
easy to look from the outside and go, oh no, if I had that amount of money, I'd follow my heart and buy what really spoke to me, like Linde Werdelins or whatever, and Hublots, and that would be the collection of just see it, kind of buy it. But I think the mentality, it's clear that the mentality of some sort of conservativeness is still there. Like these are safe purchases despite
mhm.
sort of his position. Same with the car, like get the Bronco, Resto Mod, the Porsche, like it's cool, it's desirable, it's not
And I
crazy
mean, and
risky.
even the same with the art. Like, his art
Yeah.
is it's it's not like, I think I would say there's more sort of probably thought and passion in the art than, say, the watches. Like, the watches are fine, but the other thing I really liked about it was that those half a dozen watches were his entire watch collection.
Yep.
He wasn't curating that, and he's not like got fucking, Jacob and Co's he was gifted
Mm.
hanging around the house. Like, he either doesn't take it or he sells it, which I also think is,
Or he doesn't buy it in the first place.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna say a word here that I never thought I'd say, relatable.
Yeah, because it could easily be out of hand.
Yeah.
And I mean, like John Mayer's collection, apparently completely out of hand, and there's, tons and tons of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah, or Ed Sheeran's goes bonkers and has stupid stuff.
yeah. Whereas this is almost more realistic. And I don't know if, again, it could come back to that image thing of like, I'm actually not going to have 15 or 20 or 30 watches because I don't want those optics. I don't want to wear them all. I just
Yeah.
want a good amount of
I
stuff
mean,
that I enjoy.
it's your collection, Andy. You got a couple of,
Yeah,
you
a
got a
couple of
couple
nice
of Rolexes and
watches.
a couple of Wheaties.
Yeah. And he might be one of the more relatable talking watches, which is why
Right.
it's so jarring to a lot of people. Like he actually
Yeah.
might be the more, you know?
And it's interesting, like, there was all that in the comments, like, the
Mm,
comments are an absolute, shitstorm, obviously.
mm,
There were people saying, "Oh, it's so boring," and then people are replying to that saying, "You're the ones, that when you look at people that are wild and wacky say that it's not relatable. Like, what do you want?"
yeah.
Anyway,
What do you want?
I'm not
Good
across
get.
this. You also said there's some other drama about his watch collection.
Yeah, so there was a bit of, I mean, Perez Scope posted a screenshot and sort of said the bezel was not correct, and there was some issues with one of the Paul Newman Daytonas, and then Rolex Passion Report kind of got in there, who's Philip Stahl and a bit of an authority on Rolex, obviously, as everyone knows. And they sort of had a bit of a heated argument in the comments, which I thought was very 2023 to be happening. Um, who's to know?
I,
Like, it's so much
I got
context
a question.
missing. Hmm.
Does it matter? Like, like if you believe Periscope, which is
Hmm.
probably right, broadly speaking, vast majority of Paul Newmans out there are Dodge.
Exactly.
Why are we raking someone over the coals? Either A, for buying it, thinking it's true, like when everyone probably has, and
Mm.
B, why is he criticizing Hodinkee? Like, as if you're interviewing someone.
Mm.
Imagine, like, what are you meant to do? Like, let alone a formal interview. Like, I don't know, you have this at a party and you go, oh, someone shows you a watch and it's fake. Do you go, wow, great fake watch, dude?
Yeah, and I don't know that it's on Ben to kind of like. I think it's a bit of an unfair, and there's obviously axes being ground down to the stick here. But I think, yeah, what do you expect Ben to pick it up and go, oh, that
It's not
bezel
his
font
job.
is slightly thinner than it should be. Oh, I think this is not a real bezel insert and those loom pot. Oh, let me get my loop out and let me group text and no, like that would be the weirdest thing ever to happen. It's not about that level of granularity, and I guess the point of them
Yeah.
not Ben not
Adam Levine's not,
realizing.
yeah, he's not listing it at Christie's where it's and claiming it to be something else. He might know. And like I think Philip Stahl said, he might have swapped the bezel out because the other one's worth too much money.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so I think there's a bit of reality comes into play, and he's also sharing up a part of his life that he's not done before, at the risk of normies and non-watch people kind of criticizing it, and just as celebrities often say, they don't like exposing themselves. So I don't know. It's a good get for Hodinkee. It's cool. It's different content. You're never going to please everyone, but I I think it's more relatable. Like if I was a rock star
Oh, sure.
and had rock star money, I'd probably have those. That's a similar list to what I have.
Yep, the
So
money no object list. Hey, something else, non-Rolex related. I'm going to go so far as to say friend of OT and Discord MVP,
mhm.
Nick, an Australian, wrote an article for Watches of Espionage.
I know there's a bit of a. I mean, so he's a military fella.
Yep,
Often,
he's a pilot type. And he wrote an article on the process of getting a squadron watch from Bremont, which is cool. And he speaks to he's got sort of quotes and facts and figures from the Bremont, the person who's in charge of their sort of custom
mm,
military special projects. And I
I
mean,
think it's an
honestly,
ex-military
it's
guy, isn't
cool.
it? Like he was a big ex-military guy.
Well, no, so the person I think now is, I think he says it's either Nick and or Giles's wife.
Oh, that's right. No, I think there was a.
It might be like a marketing sales guy that like goes out to bases and like, oh, you should get this done. But
Yeah, it's cool, and I think Nick's wrist shots and lore around the special editions, and the fact that there's these guys all sort of come together is often a lot cooler than the watches.
100%. Like, I'm going to be frank, and I don't mean to offend anyone in the aviation community. Please don't send a drone to my house. Some of these watches are terribly ugly from a design point of view because they've got like the plane, the squadron logo, the colors, like there's a lot going on. But
Yeah,
it's cool.
it'd
It's
be
like
pretty
it's because
cool
it's something done by committee, by a group of,
by squad.
it's like, yeah, yeah.
And I feel like if I was in the squad, it would be a very cool marker of it. And if you found other people that had, their version of the squad watch, like it would be like that's a pretty cool thing to get into.
And I don't know if I was reading it here, but on Watches of Espionage, quite possibly, or talking to someone, but I have never thought about this. It's the only, if you're in a uniform,
Mm. It's the only
the
accessory.
watch is one of the only things you can have control over.
Mm.
Like,
So yeah, that's true. And I think that the other thing I read was in this article, Bremont has done over 500 military watches in their
20%
kind
of
of history.
sales.
I dare say I think they've understated that. I think it is a very big part of the business for them, and like good on them. It's a smart niche to go after.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you see
Um,
IWC's doing it, like, and they're doing it publicly now, like they're doing special sort of public editions.
mm,
Tudor does it, and Breitling obviously has a massive history. But yeah, it's cool. And I mean, it's what? How many people in a squadron? You're looking at what, 50 watches, 20 watches. That's not an insignificant sale.
yeah, I mean I don't know what their minimum would be, but it's probably like 15 on, 15 or so. maybe 20.
Yeah, and the other thing that's cool about Bremont is that they're a lot more flexible in terms of, they go beyond just sort of doing the dial and the case back. They'll also incorporate elements, and they sort of Nick points out that many things that are now sort of offered in the collection came out of like some of the colors, like the purple middle cases or some other
Mm,
bits and bobs emerged from these special projects, which is sort of driving the brighter, broader direction, which is nice.
it is nice, Felix. And speaking
I'll
of
link it up.
nice things, thing I've been up to
Get into it.
is not nice. It's a book.
Okay.
It's called The Snakehead, an epic tale of the Chinatown underworld and American dream.
Please tell me what it's about, Andy.
Yeah, I will. It's by Patrick Radden Keith, who we've talked about before. He's got a podcast, but he's a pretty well known and decorated author from New York Times writer, I believe. This is a tale about the Chinatown underworld, and it's fascinating because it's sort of a story of immigration and sort of modern slavery and sort of there's so many kind of issues that come through it, and it's really quite eye-opening.
Okay.
What was your question?
I've got a few questions now. Is it contemporary? Like, is it like back in the day, or is it like modern sort of?
Great question, Felix. So it follows a woman called Sister Ping, who was one of the big human smugglers of the 1990s.
Sure.
Into the early 2000s. So I guess you'd say contemporary, even though it's sort of pushing 30 years now.
Workers.
Yeah, so it's sort of about all the people that sort of came over and were sort of illegally smuggled into America, under the premise of a great dream. But they were sort of owned by different, effectively, gangsters.
Yeah, and like they had like debt contracts and stuff, and
yeah, and they had to sort of work off, they're basically the cost of their passage. And so it sort of resulted in people working for 3 or 4 years for free. And it sort of looks at the leaders of the gangs. There's one sort of, central point, which is his grandmother, who basically ran it out of a noodle shop in Chinatown and made millions and millions of dollars of doing it. And then there's sort of like the reverse immigration that resulted. So what was happening is they were coming to America quite young, having children, sending the children back to these poor towns in China that were now under like staffed as far as labor goes because everyone left. And it was just left with like babies and old people, whilst that middle point were over in America trying to make something.
On a scale of interesting to this is not what I want to read right before bed, where is it how upsetting is it, or is it just more sort of interesting and gripping?
It's interesting and gripping. I don't think it's really upsetting at all. Like, it's not specific.
Okay.
Really, it's
Sure.
it's interesting.
Abstract.
It's kind of it's something you probably wouldn't have thought about or thought of unless it sort of directly impacted you and your family.
Sure.
So the snakehead.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't have a good. Speaking of snakeheads, that's not going to work. Should we get your best friend and longtime watch crush?
Let's get Jorn on for a chat. Today's guest is Jorn Werdelin. You might know from Linde Werdelin. Jorn co-founded the brand, and he really puts the Werdelin in the namesake back in 2002. So 20 years on. It's an independent brand, and it's a brand that has always been interesting to me. It's really one of the first watch brands that sort of caught my eye. Welcome to the podcast, Jorn.
Well, thank you, Andy, and good to speak to you again. Like you said, we met probably about 10 years ago in Notting Hill when we had a coffee together.
Yeah.
So I guess it's about time we have another chat.
I know, we have a check-in. I was sort of saying to you just before we hit record, Linde Werdelin was a brand that, like, it did catch my eye. And I think it was one of the first watch brands I sort of started writing about when I got into that side of things. There's a pretty, enthusiastic collector here in Melbourne as well. A guy named Dane, who a lot of people know as the Watch Fault now, who had, he was collecting them and he was really enthusiastic and probably the only guy I knew at the time that sort of had them. And I know his fondness, I think, maybe transferred over to me.
Yeah, I think I remember that he might still have one of the original octopus tattoo.
Yes, yeah, that's
the very first ones. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard because I've got a lot of questions and I want to kind of chat to you a lot. I mean, the original tattoo is a really special watch. The Spider Speed, you get the Moonface stuff. But before we do that, why don't you tell me how the brand started? Let's go back to the start. Let's go back 21 years.
Yeah, so the original idea was that we had watches with digital instruments that you
Hmm.
could attach for skiing and for diving. So it really came out of, I guess, well, both Morten's and my interest in, primarily in skiing, which then went into diving also.
Mm.
So that is really about those two universes. And between 2002 and 2012,
Hmm.
when we stopped doing the instruments, we developed between 2002 and 2007. And you have to remember when we came out with our first watches and instruments, that was pretty much the same time as the iPhone came out.
Yep.
And the iPhone really changed a lot of things in terms of what was hardware and software.
Hmm.
So in 2012, we found out that our instruments were, we couldn't keep up the pace with innovation in terms of what you could do on a phone.
Mm.
But I mean, the origin behind the brand was our interest in both horology and in sports, and really the notion of making kind of the ultimate sports watch.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, on your background, you're obviously, the sports, the skiing, we still see that in the Linde Werdelin designs today, and a bit of, mountaineering and the vibes of sort of exploration. But you also, if I recall correctly, you have a jewelry background. That was sort of the stepping stone in.
Well, my father and grandfather had
Mm-hmm.
watch and jewelry
Mm.
stores in Denmark, so I grew up in that environment, and saw the stuff when I was a child,
Mm-hmm.
and when my dad came home from Basel, back in I guess the 70s and
Mm.
80s. But there was a period between, I wouldn't say I aspired to, to work in that in the industry.
Mm.
And I worked in investment banking for about 10 years. And then when Morten and I we got together, which we did often, we kind of sort of developed this idea about having a mechanical timepiece with digital instruments, and I think we were both ready to do something different, something which was much more, personal. And suddenly 21 years later, still doing the same.
That's very cool. And sort of Felix, who unfortunately couldn't join us tonight, or today
Yeah.
for you, we've sort of been on this theory that sort of 2010, 2011, 2012 was sort of like a golden era for watchmaking. Obviously not with, the iPhone coming out, but for the watch industry as a whole, that was sort of really when you were finding, your strides as a brand,
Yeah.
as you just mentioned. So it's sort of I'll add that to my timeline of, golden era of watchmaking. The other thing I really like as I was sort of preparing for this chat, having, been across the brand for some time, is, we talked about the instrument side of things, and maybe, you predicted the iPhone, but things like DLC, you have your own brand marketplace, and I still remember the announcement coming out for that from you guys, sort of saying you were going to buy back pieces, and it was sort of, to help rehome watches to, customers, and also, protecting secondhand prices was something that I can't think of a brand that was doing it before you.
No.
You go, yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, so in 2015,
Mm.
there was some major changes going on in the industry, and
Yep.
partly because of Putin going into Crimea and anti-corruption drive, and we had followed a model where we had a lot of retailers,
Yep.
across a lot of countries, including Australia,
Yes.
and we grew very quickly. But
Mm.
then in the summer of 2015, suddenly it seemed that everything stopped,
Yeah.
and as a new brand or an independent brand, we felt that we were very exposed. So we decided to cut wholesale,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of minimize the exposure, and also to have a much more customer centric model. And when we had decided upon to only speaking directly to the customer,
Yeah.
we also found that a lot of our customers, they were trading our watches, and including other watches. And I think it was the same time that kind of the whole world of pre-owned developed with Chrono
Mm.
24, Chronext, Watchfinder, etc. And and I think I was a bit disappointed, to know that people traded our watches and we were not involved. And we would occasionally get people, come to us with our own pre-owned and say, can I swap it in? But we had nothing to do with those watches. It was, right? And that was when we thought, well, luxury cars, there you can always go with your, old car and swap it in for a new car. And there was really with that in mind that we started thinking about it. But it was also a bit of a risk and a challenge, because you open yourself up to, how does the pre-owned price compare to new price? Yep. And you have to remember, this is not 22, 21 when, a few brands, they go absolutely nuts, and where other brands, they manipulate their own, prices at auctions, etc., etc. It was pre the, kind of watches as an investment or as an asset time. But what we found was that our watches at that time, generally, pre-owned was about 70%, and sometimes maybe 150% of new prices. And obviously, what we've done, since the beginning, is that we've always done, limited edition of watches, or when we don't feel like doing a watch anymore, we just stop doing it.
Yeah.
And that meant a lot of the catalog you simply can't get anymore. And obviously that is helpful. So we started doing this in May 16.
Yeah.
And we were the first watch brand to do pre-owned. And I think since then, I mean, that Rolex announced maybe 6 or 12 months, and I think pre-owned is really the driving factor of watches these days, right? People look on the pre-owned platform, see how much is that watch worth, how much does it cost, and then compare that to new price. So it's become ever more important.
Yes, it's a massive factor, isn't it?
But I also have to say, I think it's a fine balance, because, of course, you don't want a watch to lose a lot of value, and partly because good watches do cost a lot of money. But I just don't like the idea that it's an investment asset, and I think people should buy watches because they desire them, because it makes them smile when they put their watch on the wrist. We recently launched the Octopus White Black Ink, and that was a bit of a, when we first put it together, I looked at it, I wasn't sure whether it would work, the whole sort of white black thing. And when I put it on, it's like, this is a great summer piece, right? And that's really, for me, that's the idea behind a watch, right? Is that you have to enjoy it.
I totally agree. And sort of the pre-owned market is one part of what you just said. And yeah, you're right. I mean, Rolex is still trying to roll it out 6 or 12 months later. And I think finding out how difficult it is at that scale. The other thing is controlling the wholesale, which obviously, if you don't have wholesale, you control direct to customer, you control things like discounting, which I think was very discounting for a lot of people for a long time. Was like, well, what's the true price of this, even at retail? And then, learning that if you went to the right place, you might save 30% on something, or 40%, or whatever it was, and sort of totally eliminating it. And you just you are triggering all these memories of when this is sort of happening. Because I might have even spoken to you guys about it. It works, right? Like I sort of, going back to Dane and sort of a few of his Grail pieces, I remember vividly, him really liking not just the tattoo, but the Moonface, the Moonface watch, I think it was the Octopus Moon, and that being his Grail piece. And I jumped on Chrono 24. Firstly, there's 34 watches on there, which is not very many. So I'd say you're doing your job on the pre-owned side of things, but the prices have all held really, really well. And I'd say it's still probably above retail for a lot of stuff, 10, 15 years on, which is impressive. But why do you think this, why is the original Octopus tattoo so special? Like what is the allure, do you think?
I can't really say. I think it's maybe just because, it was the first one, and it was different. It was a little bit out, with the tentacles on the hands.
Engraving.
Yeah, but honestly, I I wouldn't say was one of the first watches with an engraving. For me, the one that sticks out because is the octopus moon tattoo in gold, because that's where Morten and I say, okay, let's just go all out. Let's do everything we know about watchmaking. And the little sort of telltale in that is is the moon, which is painted from a young moon to an old moon, so like a life cycle. And I thought that was sort of a bit of poetry into the complication. But I think different people have different, I think the original Spider Light, Sven Andersen, I think was an important piece for us because, when we launched that in March 2009 at Basel World, that was, I would say that it was a game changer for us because before then most of our watches were, steel cases, ETA movements, and when the Spider Light came out, which was inspired by mountaineering, because it was the whole idea of reducing weights.
Yes.
And the way Morten thought about reducing weight was to take material out of the case. And that became the piece that people came to look at when we launched it in 2000. And then also with the added, Sven Andersen movement inside it, which kind of put it on a different level in terms of horology. And the interest in that changed things for us, dramatically, and to know, okay, so we got to, we have one family, the Spider Light family, and then we're going to do another family, the Octopus family, which was inspired by going down by dive bells, etc. And so yeah, I would say 2009 was a seminal year for us in terms of where we went as a brand.
It really is. There's people that get it really seem to get it and really seem to kind of lust after. And there's a few pieces, that you've done over the years that are really kind of, you kind of hear the word grail and dream and thrown around with whenever you kind of talk to, enthusiasts and people that kind of get the brand. And I've always found that quite cool. And as you mentioned, engraving, it's you did go on to do engraving with Johnny Dow, who's king nerd, who has absolutely just taken his work to new levels over the last few years. So again, another sort of engraving's been around forever, but sort of that maybe collaborating on that sort of thing.
Yeah, and also do it in a style that I'm not sure was really done before. So the first one we did with him was called The Reef, and was obviously inspired by, the sea. And then we did one called Crazy Universe, which was, planets and, stuff right from the universe. And then we've, some years back we did one called Volcano, which was, like the word say, a volcano splashing out over the case, right, with gold inlay and blackened titanium, and again, when we did it, I mean, actually neither Johnny or I knew how it would come out, and it was only when we put it together that we realized, okay, this is actually a very cool piece. But it could equally have been a disaster. But I think just that's also the fun part. Sometimes you just have to do stuff a bit sort of on the on the inspiration, right? Okay, well, let's have a go at it. See how it comes out. Because if you're always too conservative or too careful, you don't innovate, right? You don't test your own limits.
Yeah, that's amazing. That reef. I mean, and we'll link this up in the show notes. But I have vivid memories of catching up with Johnny in London just after he'd done it, and he was wearing it around. He was very proud of it because he's sort of, for him it was one of the first sort of watches that he was sort of publicly able to sort of talk about and share that he was working on one of his sort of first, I guess, named collaboration. And obviously he had his background at Purdy's, but he was doing a lot of stuff, I think, behind the scenes up until this point, which is which is really quite special, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is almost 10 years ago. Right?
We're old.
2014, I think we came out with the reef. Maybe even earlier. Maybe it is actually 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's
We'll have
pushing
to go
it.
and look back at it. Yeah.
Well, what I want to ask you on that, that note. So, 21 years. I think you sort of released your first watches 2005, 2006, and you've got the ability to sort of look back 15 years at those very first designs and to the inception and start of the brand. How do you think it has, aged since you started? Like when you look at your original kind of timepieces and designs.
Well, I have to say that it has aged well, haven't I?
You have to, yeah.
When I look back, right, there was obviously, there were the first 4 to 5 years where we only developed and produced, and then after we launched, and then there was a period, I would say probably between when we started in 2002 and then up until 11, 12, 13, where we innovated a lot and we were constantly sort of trying to push ourselves. Well, what is the next level? And then probably at about 16 or 17, I felt that, okay, we have a level now. We have to absorb where we are. We have to, we have to have continuity because we're such a small brand, and in order to have to be consistent or to be in this industry, your pieces have to be recognizable.
Yes.
So there's a point where you kind of have to say, okay, now we have what we want to have, and then we have to continue with only minor changes. So rather than a revolution, more like evolution. And I think what people appreciate now is that we are very consistent in terms of what we do. And there really is only the two families, the Spiderlight or Spider Speed, and then the Octopus. And right now we're working on what I call the third generation.
Okay.
Which we are coming out with probably in about 12 months' time or so. But what you will see there again is very small changes to the case design, some changes in the dials, some changes in the movements, etc., etc. But when you look at the piece, you would be, from 1 meter or 2 meter far, you would not be able to tell the difference between an existing Octopus Spiderlight or the new ones, and that's very intentional. Because when I look at some of the most successful brands,
yes,
they, that's what they do, and it's not to copy them, but I really do think that our customer, they don't want completely different new stuff from us. They want what we have already made, and I sometimes liken it to, a Porsche 911. If you look at a Porsche 911 model 2023, you can recognize, the first models, which I think was 1961.
Yes.
Right? There's a clear, design language in that is very stringent, and that's exactly what we want, right? And I think when you've done something good and you are proud of it and you like it, then stick to it, right? Don't try and come up with something new just for newness' sake. Watchmaking is not fashion.
Yeah.
Watchmaking is I would say, as it's called, hard luxury goods, right? And it needs to be consistent. It needs to, provide security, right? If that's the word, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not an efficient way to do things if you're just going to kind of reinvent over and over again.
No, and I think you just confuse people, right? I know brands have gone in one direction and then changed back to another direction because they kind of want to follow fashion, right? It's about, okay, how many watches do we sell in the next 3 months? And then in the next 3 months. And if then the industry goes, changes direction, which it does, right? I mean, for a long time, you couldn't get a big enough watch, right? We would sit in Basel and people would say, oh, but your watches are too small. Why don't you do 50 millimeters, right? And then you go to a period where people want, 34 millimeters, right? And then people go retro, which they've done for a long time now. And you can't follow, or certainly we can't follow, the whims of what do we think happens in the next 3 months? I mean, developing a new watch takes years, and it should take years. It's a complicated thing.
Yeah, good things take time. Okay, so in you've launched kind of a new product or service. I think it's LW appointment. In that email, there was, you can tell me what that is in a second, but there's a story in that email about an appointment that you guys took in, I think it was Paris.
Yeah.
Well, I saw the email and I just forwarded it to Felix. I said, we need to get Jorn on and I want to hear what this story is because it sounds interesting. So take it from the top.
Well, it was, we had a call or an email from someone, right? And they wanted to meet us in Paris and they, wanted to see a few pieces. And we were a little unsure whether it was for real or not. But we thought, okay, you know what? It's worthwhile pursuing. We are going to Paris anyway. And I came along, which I don't do always. We met with them at the Park Hyatt on near Place Vendôme, and two guys come in. I'm not going to say where they're from because that sounds wrong.
Yep.
And one of them had like a very thick wad of cash in his inner pocket, and said, something like, we got money to pay. And it's like, all right, okay, take it easy now. And they looked at the pieces, and you could see they weren't really that interested. They were not like watch aficionados, etc., etc. And then it came out sort of very clearly, we just want to buy 10 gold. Okay. Well, we don't have that with us. Okay, so can we meet tomorrow? Can you get them for tomorrow? And we're like, well, yes, maybe. And they wanted to pay cash, which was very unusual. And obviously we can't accept that amount of cash. And then they wanted to meet us at a place which was not the hotel, but they would tell us where to meet. And by that point, we just knew this is absolute, this is not good at all. And so, we said, yeah, no, sure. And, they left the hotel. And after I think we're sort of a little shocked, right? And then we leave the hotel, we're going back to London. And then when we come out, we see, a couple of guys with mobile phones, and they follow us. And we have probably 4 or 6 pieces with us or something, right? And most of them being samples, but, still,
yeah.
Yeah. And so, as we're walking down, we say, okay, we got to go into another hotel, right? Because that's kind of the only place where you're safe. So we went into Hotel Cost and sat there, and there was another guy that came in. This was now getting, quite unpleasant, right?
Yeah.
And so we asked, the hotel, can you book us a car? And we jumped into the car and said, full speed to the airport. And it was actually only at the point where we were through check-in that it's like, phew, Jesus, this was really. So I mean, and I would say, that is the only time that we have had, felt uncomfortable, and we've had quite a few of these, LW by appointments, but obviously we always make sure that it's in a safe environment, and and generally we know that these are people that are interested in what we do, right, and actually they want to see our watches and they want to buy. So it's not something that worries us, a lot generally. And, you kind of, understand very early on if people are for real or for not, right?
You got to be careful, don't you?
So that was that. Quite an experience.
Yeah, it would have been stressful, especially Paris is sort of, I
can imagine. It could have ended wrong, right?
That could have gone. That could have gone very badly. But LW appointment is still around despite some best efforts. So what is that? What do I get? Coffee with yourself?
No, it really depends. As I said, sometimes I come along because we got other things to do, and sometimes I don't. Well, we just had one we had one recently in California where I didn't go.
Okay.
And then we did and then we did a trip to New York and Dallas, but that was more because we had a particular client which we wanted to do something for. So we also had a dinner with him and some of his watch friends, and then we had another dinner in New York. Very good customer who owns 6 pieces of ours, and so it's also a little bit about the custom orientation, right? Because when we meet with a client who has multiple pieces, it's not it's not about selling him a watch. It's more having the opportunity to spend a bit of time with them and have lunch or dinner or something like that. And it really comes back to the notion of being close to our customer, right? Because we in that sense we're not a normal brand. People, they will walk into a shop and buy a big brand. They don't care about who makes it, and the brand doesn't really care that much about the individual customer. And we are right at the other end of the spectrum, making about say 150 pieces per year. Is that we do care about the customer, and it's an advantage that we have that bigger brands cannot copy.
I think that's brilliant, and it's sort of, I think, probably why people that get it and are part of that sort of LW owners club really are so passionate. I want to ask you another meaty question around sustainability. It's the latest trend in watches and in a lot of corporate businesses. But I believe a couple of years ago you did win an award for the Circular Economy Pioneer of the Year award at the Positive Luxury Awards. What does that mean?
Yeah,
What are you guys doing as far as sustainability goes?
I mean, the whole sustainability and sort of trying to be good for the environment it's a very complicated kind of thing to achieve, because it happens at so many levels, and you can't just go from kind of not doing it to doing it completely. It's something that you have to work on. I mean, I guess really, forever, right? So when we started out, for instance, with packaging, right, we didn't think that it would have to be sustainable. It just wasn't, part of what you thought about in 2005 and 2010. So for a number of years, we did, our watch boxes in wood. They would be, quite big, because that was the
thing at the time.
that was what you had to do at that time. And then a few years ago, we decided this doesn't really work for us anymore, because obviously it's a huge waste. And you have that box and you buy the piece in the box. It looks very impressive. But then when you take the watch out, what do you do with the box? Do you put it in a drawer and in a shelf, or do you throw it out? And then we started thinking about, well, we want our watch cases to be useful and also to be sustainable. And we worked on this for the last couple of years, and now we're doing a watch a watch box which is made of completely organic, sustainable materials, and at the same time can be used as a travel box where you can pack in 2 watches. You don't need to have 2 watches; it looks perfectly fine with one, and a little drawer where you can have a couple of straps and a strap tool, and just that's just one end of it, right? And then our straps, they are now 30% recycled material. Again, we can't go higher, because then we compromise on the integrity of the feel, or of the strap also. So it's all along it's compromises, but also small changes to make it better and better all the time. But for one thing is, before, when we had a lot of retailers worldwide, me in particular, I did a lot of traveling, it was plus 180 nights per year. And you can imagine how many flights that is, right? All the time. And I mean, it was also a personal decision, but obviously that also cuts, kind of, the flight tickets that we took, right? So I think it goes all the way around. And a couple of years ago, I was, sort of, laughing a bit, because there was a sustainability forum in Geneva in the watch industry, and a lot of journalists had flown in to attend it, right? And I was like, well, in this day and age, you can do that online, right? And if you have a forum about sustainability, that must be the first thing you think about, right? We are not going to invite 100 people to come to Geneva. We're actually going to do it online.
Yeah, it's a very fair point, isn't it? It's sort of yeah, we're still learning, but I think that's a good answer.
Yeah, it's like you and me. I'm not going to fly to Australia to have this chat, right? You're not going to fly to London to have this chat. We do it online, right? And that works perfectly fine.
As much as I would love to, maybe towards the end of the year, I'll come over. That would be amazing. Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot happening. I'm excited to see what's coming next. The last question that I have for you, before I let you get back and get on with your day, is a question we ask all of our lovely guests at the end of the chat, and that is a non-watch recommendation of something that you personally enjoy or love doing. It can be anything: a podcast, book, some sort of exercise, cooking, whatever it is that you think the people listening right now would also enjoy.
Well, I do love to cook. So actually, tonight is my second daughter's 21st birthday, and she's asked me to make a risotto for her.
Lovely.
So, or for the family. So that's what I'm going to do. And I haven't quite decided whether it should be a sausage and saffron risotto, or maybe mushrooms and maybe some clams or something. And then apart from that, I like the sea. So a couple of years ago I moved to Portugal, and I'm very lucky to have the sea in front of me most of the time, which is a little bit like when I grew up in Denmark, which obviously is surrounded by the water also. So, and I guess you in Melbourne, you must be close to the ocean as well.
It's funny. I've just started going to the pool. I can't swim, but I've just started to going to the pool and kind of figure it out and get some lessons. And I have noticed the mental health wise, but just the enjoyment of sort of being in water, and maybe it's the takes a bit of weight off my shoulders and my joints, but I have sort of felt it quite. I don't know if the centering is the word, but I find it very relaxing. So.
No, I mean, I think that's proven, right? That going swimming in the sea or in a pool, cold water, is very good for your mental health. And I mean, personally, I go, when I can exercise in the morning, I exercise, then I have a cold shower, sauna and cold shower, and you just feel tremendous afterwards.
Well, there you go. A bit of home cooking for the family and some swimming. That's a great recommendation.
Yeah.
Jorn, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Andrew.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope to catch up with you in person soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it.
And let's speak before another 10 years have gone.
Yeah, once a decade coffee.
Andy, lovely chat with Mr. Werdelin, one half of Linde Werdelin. Maybe we should get like staff Linde Werdelins. Do you reckon?
We should get staff Linde Werdelins. That'd be very cool. If you want to help us get staff Linde Werdelins, tell your friends. Make sure you subscribe. Join our Discord for a great chat. Follow us on social media, ot.podcast, or email us otthepodcast@gmail.com.
Hey, also a bit of YouTube. We're putting some videos up there and doing bits and bobs.
Yeah, last week's episode with Eric Wind is also available on YouTube if you want to watch us talk instead of listen to us talk. Cool. Well, Felix, I'll see you next week.
Have a great one.
Bye.